Welcome to Mormon Millennials podcast. This is our third episode, I believe. I'm Ian. Been here a couple of times before. I'm here with the main crew.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey.
And it's no surprise what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to do sort of a reaction episode to the events dealing with John Dehlin and Kate Kelly and
Rock Waterman.
And Rock Waterman. And who was the one that was last year? I keep forgetting.
Denver Snuffers.
That's the one. Yes.
We were originally planning on speaking on epistemology, but this was pretty current, so we couldn't help ourselves.
Yeah.
But do we really know what we were going to talk about next?
I don't get it.
That's
kidding.
Can we ever know what we'll talk about
guys,
in the next
he's
episode?
made an epistemology joke.
Oh! Okay.
Anyway, so I'm going to make the assumption that most of the people listening to this have seen all the hubbub.
I think that's a safe assumption to make.
Yes.
Our listeners are very smart and they read the New York Times.
And The Economist.
Yes, and The Economist.
Inside joke. Okay.
Yeah, guys, too many inside jokes.
You know what? The listeners can come on the inside of our jokes. They can be on the inside.
So, who wants to do sort of an introduction to what's going on?
I think that Grant should.
Yes.
Me?
Yeah. You tend to be eloquent.
Okay. Well, so, I mean, John Dehlin and Kate Kelly and Alan Rock Waterman have received notices that they're going to be tried and possibly excommunicated in church courts. And,
Courts of love.
yeah.
I think that's something that's really important to emphasize.
Yes, exactly. I feel the love.
That was so sarcastic. I'm sorry if I offended anyone, but I'm really okay. Keep going. Sorry.
Okay. So, I mean, personally, I didn't think it was terribly surprising. In fact, I was more surprised that something like this hadn't happened already. But
Was it just the local leaders, or is it coordinated from higher up in the church? Also, what does that mean for those of us who are still in the church but fall into the margins that Kate Kelly and John Dehlin so dangerously found themselves prior to their letters of disciplinary notice?
Yeah, and what exactly are their crimes? You know, what did they,
Yeah.
I mean, what they make the claims of like heresy or apostasy, but what did they do that constitutes that?
And so the central question is, what is apostasy?
Yeah.
And have they done what that is?
Right.
well, and I think what's particularly interesting is looking at the church's response. What's their cost-benefit analysis of taking this sort of action when they know it's going to get them bad press? Like, why are they doing what they're doing? What kind of effect is this going to have on the future?
Well, that's assuming central decision. But yeah,
Yeah.
which I think it is. But
I mean, so...
But even if it's not, it's still an official church stance on it. So it's like it's saying the lower court's taken.
But also
precedence.
something interesting that I think to know is when I've talked to Paul Toscano, he makes it sound like his excommunication, so this September 6th, wasn't really like all of the leadership at the top. It was just like Boyd K. Packer that orchestrated some of it, or individual leaders at the top. And also there was a post today on Rational Faiths by a sister from Ordained Women who was threatened with excommunication in January. She was the first member of Ordained Women to be threatened with excommunication. And the bishop told her that an area authority had like told him basically he didn't have an option, he had to do it. And then the next day he called her and like took her back. And so it could be like rogue area authorities or like just one of the members of the 12, you know, I don't know.
One post
You know
I
what I
was
mean?
seeing is that actually Elder Ballard had just gone to Washington, D.C. like a week and a half ago and had spoken also with several stake presidents, including Kate Kelly's.
Well, and I think that, so there are different ways that a decision like this can come from the top, and even if we assume that there's something like, a member of the 12 or an area authority saying, oh, you need to take this action, even if we assume that that didn't happen, there still is an element of this being central in the sense that the church's strengthening church members committee is still gathering information. So they could have just sent that information out to these leaders at the same time, hoping that they would make this decision, and they ended up making the decision at the same time.
Well, as a member, I feel stronger Thank you, strengthening
Yes.
the members committee. I feel stronger for that information.
Well, that's one of the things is I didn't even know this committee existed. I'll show my own ignorance here a little bit. I had no idea that was a thing.
Until
this.
So, yeah, and so I think,
So
at least
what
for my sake, a little discussion on what it is and how that process goes about, I think would be useful.
let's have, do you want to talk about it, Andrew? 'Cause I feel like you know.
Well, the first time I actually heard about it, I was reading John Krakauer's Under the Banner of Heaven, and he had this thing at the back, like I can't remember, but he was talking about this strengthening the members committee, which is this body of the church, this wing of the church that sort of a semi-secretive, like no one really knows who's on it, but apparently they comb.
So is it general authorities that are on it, or
I don't know. John Larson.
Super secretive.
Yeah, John Larson's actually talked a little bit about it, which is also where I got some more information. But he, so what I know is that they gather information on members, both pro and con, and they put it in a file, and that's if you're in the New York Times, the Washington Post, like any major media outlet or whatever, they'll make a note of what you said, and that goes like for celebrities that are both Mormon, non-Mormons, like Oprah might have one, and Larry King, and other people, any news people who might potentially have a link to Mormonism, and then they put in a file in it. So apparently, what's happened is that those strengthening the members committee has like sent out those notices to the various leadership to say like, hey, this is what they're saying, which I can't imagine that they didn't know beforehand what these people were saying, which again I think indicates that this was more centrally directed. I mean, the timing is just with these three prominent internet figures getting the same sort of notice. I can't help but think it was.
Well, being told, if you're like a local leader and you're receiving a packet of information that, for instance, Kate Kelly's bishop knew what she was up to, knew what she was doing.
Right.
Kate Kelly had been keeping her in contact the whole time, or keeping him in contact the whole time, but getting a packet of information from this committee would certainly tip the bishop's hand. What I think is interesting about the church membership committee, so it was formed under Ezra Taft Benson, who
TV.
exactly. So he was a member of the John Birch Society
Brother Birch
in the 1950s during like the height of the Red Scare and McCarthyism, right? And so this is really interesting that this.
Should we give a brief explanation of that, just in case someone is acquainted with the depths of American history?
If you don't know what McCarthyism is or John Birch, just go Google it.
Oh, I know. Explain it.
If you're listening to this on the internet, you have Google.
What a millennial attitude.
Okay, so it's interesting that you have this committee formed by someone who was right in the thick of it at the heart and at the height of McCarthyism.
He was also in the Eisenhower administration, so
Yeah.
Anyways, at the time, so that's why.
Right, and so I to me this looks very similar to what was going on in the Red Scare and looking for communists that were going to destroy America when most of them were actually pretty innocent, and it was just a way
and the Civil Rights Movement.
And the Civil Rights Movement. I mean,
destroy America.
You can read a pamphlet that Ezra Taft Benson wrote about how the Civil Rights Movement was a communist plot to start a race war and destroy America. So I don't know.
Well, it didn't work.
So let's try to get to first. So we said the heart of the issue was what is apostasy. So why don't each of us go around and kind of share with like our thoughts on what apostasy seems to be to us, and whether or not this qualifies as apostasy just procedurally.
Well, it seems to me that apostasy is outright disobedience or contradiction of leaders, which, I mean, I was just reading a post called On Excommunication by Ronan by Common Consent, and he, John Dehlin has been very open in terms of his disbelief, but it hasn't seemed to me that he's really done anything to contradict church leaders except for express his opinion on issues. And if expressing opinion is apostasy, well, then a lot of people are in danger because the internet's full of that. It just seems to me that John Dehlin is just a prominent figure that they can focus in on, but given the reactions we've seen on the internet, we're seeing how that's backfiring. Also, Kate Kelly, some people have made a stronger claim about her apostasy, which is that she's claimed she is advocating for the ordination of women. But as far as apostasy, Ronan makes this point. She didn't start her own church or start ordaining women. What she did was went to go to try and get into the priesthood session and has asked them to pray about female ordination. She hasn't demanded it. She said, hey, get a revelation on this, or citing Gordon B. Hinckley's statement that why women don't hold the priesthood. He said something like, well, we don't really have women agitating for that. And so she says, well, we're going to agitate.
Well, let's agitate.
Right, they're agitating faithfully. In their minds, all they're doing is just pressing for a decision to be made or pressing for further information. But I don't know. So that I would say apostasy is something like organizing your own church, or or ordaining women when you shouldn't. I guess.
So
but I don't.
Would you consider yourself an apostate?
No, because I don't believe it. So I don't think that I'm. I think
you can't apostate from something you don't believe in.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think you can apostatize from something that you don't claim has any authority over you.
Well, I don't think. I guess our definition, even your definition isn't really my definition.
Yeah.
But I don't think that our particular definition is what matters. What matters is the church's definition. How are they defining apostasy, and then how do these three people fit within that definition? And looking for that definition right now.
Oh,
So if I can find
oh,
it.
you're looking for Webster's
For the
definition.
churches?
No, I'm looking for the churches
The
from
church's
the handbook.
definition.
if
Oh,
I can
okay.
find
Well,
it.
this is interesting. So I just was looking for the etymology, because whenever I want to understand a word, I always look for its etymology.
Well, you speak so many languages.
Apostasy comes from the Latin apostasia, which comes from the Greek apostasia, which means defection or revolt.
Ah.
And it comes from the verb apistemi, which means I withdraw or I revolt. So, and so like the first part, apo, means from, like coming out from, and then the root histemi is I stand, for so coming out from where I stand. It's interesting. Speaking of the languages I speak, whenever I think of apostasy, I think of the Chinese term pan jiao. Pan means to betray, and then jiao is the teaching. So an apostate is just anyone who betrays the teaching. So I think that's interesting, because I feel like connotatively, an apostate is, like you were saying, someone who still believes it, but is teaching something different from what the orthodoxy teaches. So, when you think of like fundamentalists, like the fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with like polygamy and stuff, that feels like apostasy. Whereas someone who's just like, I don't think I believe in God anymore, and then walks away from Mormonism and never to do with it again, doesn't seem so much apostate.
Well, it depends on who holds the power, too, because the FLDS would say that the mainstream Mormon LDS Church is an apostasy because of polygamy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think this happens all the time, whether it's Soviet Russia or Islam, where people call each other apostates and start excommunicating each other. Like, especially in places where there isn't a central authority, like in Islam. So, the entire doctrine of jihad, or of like violent jihad, that can kill Muslims.
not Muslims.
No, that can kill Muslims.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
is that you excommunicate them, because really anyone can just say like I excommunicate you, and then they can kill you because you're not Muslim anymore.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, more Muslims are killed by terrorists than any other group. Or Muslims are killed by terrorists more than any other group.
Yeah.
Yeah, Muslims are killed by terrorists more than non-Muslims are. Anyway, so this is the church's definition, and it comes from the handbook, and this is what the church leaders are using when they're evaluating these decisions.
I'm excited to hear this because I want to evaluate whether or not I qualify.
Okay, so this is it says apostasy refers to members who, and this is a quote, repeatedly act in clear, open, and deliberate public opposition to the church or its leaders. This also includes those who repeatedly present information as church doctrine that is not church doctrine, and those who repeatedly follow the teachings of apostate sects, or those who formally join another church.
Those who formally join another church.
Right.
See, I don't see. I think to the extent that Kate Kelly qualifies, she did lead the women onto Temple ground, the Temple Square grounds, which they told her not to. But I don't know. I don't think that. I think her. But they're also saying that she's teaching that women should be ordained as church doctrine. I don't know if she's taught that. I don't know if she's said that. She's, as far as I know, whatever we may think of it, she's just been saying that they ought to ask God to receive a revelation regarding the issue.
And she is so careful with her words. I mean, she's a human rights lawyer. You know, like she is very well aware of the power of words, like and like details.
Well, so to be devil's advocate for just a moment, which may or may not be my position in this, but she is a lawyer, civil rights, and they are taking her to trial where she will not be present.
Maybe she's a communist too.
Well, but she won't be present.
Don't insult her like that.
I'm not sure we don't have a communist in this room. But she's not going to be present, and then what she spends so much time doing is saying that there should be equality and power in the church between men and women, and she will be judged by a group of men.
And by her bishopric,
right?
No less.
It's
not even the same president.
The process is
not even just a bishopric. She doesn't live there anymore. So if wards are truly geographical, then it should be the one where she is now.
Right, but her bishop has for a long time refused to move her records out of her ward, and out of that old ward that she's moved out of a long time.
Why?
Very interesting.
I don't know.
I thought, oh, really?
Fascinating. And she said that her bishop, like she had talked to her bishop, made everything clear, and he seemed to be fine. Like for a year, she was involved with ordained women and active in her ward and had a calling, and her bishop said nothing. Yeah. So that's why it seems so much like it's coming from above.
I don't think that us like deciding, does she deserve to be excommunicated or not, is not really the point. I mean, the church has the right as a private institution to, let who they want in and kick who they want out.
I disagree with that, but keep going. I'll tell you why.
Okay, I mean, I think that the church, has the right to define what is its membership. That doesn't
legally,
right?
They're not making a legal argument; they're making a religious argument. So the instant they don't say, because their argument isn't, "Hey, we're a private institution; we can kick out whomever we please." Their argument is, "We speak for God, and so we will kick out those who betray God."
Right,
so you have to approach them on their own argument, not like step out of their own argument and look at it in like this libertarian legal context.
Okay, but
because the government isn't involved in it.
Yeah, the government. We're not even talking about the government. That's why I hate it when people are like private institution. They can do what they want.
Okay, but here's the thing, though. Like, I mean, if this is hypothetically a just thing, and I'm not saying I think it is, then okay. So there are two ways you can look at this. It can either have the sanction of God or not. And if it does have the sanction of God, then I guess, okay. If it doesn't, though, then it doesn't really matter what they do, whether they kick her out or not, or John or Rock. If it doesn't have the sanction of God, then a sort of administrative decision like this doesn't matter at all.
Well, it may not matter
from a religious,
soteriologically in terms of salvation.
In terms of salvation,
but it matters a great.
I
do. But it matters a great deal in terms of the community. Excommunication means.
It does.
So let's stop looking at this from like a is this right or wrong perspective, and look at it for a moment from a sociological perspective, as in like who cares if it's right or wrong? Who cares if it's legal or not? Which it obviously is, but not from like the perspective of property rights, but rather from the perspective of what caused this and what kind of an impact will it have on the community.
Right.
That's the level of analysis that's most useful, I think.
What I think they're really trying to do is to silence these people to give them less credibility in the eyes of potential sympathizers, and to make, again, people who might sympathize with them afraid to associate with them or to bring them up, because now if John Dehlin posts a podcast, people can dismiss it saying, "Oh, he's an ex-Mormon."
Yeah.
And it sends a clear message that these people are they're going to become now boogeymen.
Yeah.
Or boogie people.
And I think another thing that it does is it pushes a few people that were like almost to the margins into the margins, and it pushes a few people that were in the margins out of the church, just a few. But at the end of the day, I bet most of your average members don't even know the names Kate Kelly or John Dehlin.
I think they do now.
Or Rock Waterman.
I
talk
don't
about him. But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I think what the church is doing, I mean, the PR department isn't stupid, and the leaders are not.
Sometimes I think they are.
the leaders are not stupid. I think what they're doing is they're weighing the cost of, yes, there's going to be...
So you're assuming that they're rational.
Yeah.
Why am I not surprised that Grant would assume that they're rational actors?
Because this is public choice, guys. This is
Public
economics.
choice.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Okay, so these are things that we learned from economics. We're all economics majors. You guys know what I'm talking about.
And yeah, okay, keep going.
Okay,
I mean, I
keep
critique
going.
everything you say.
but what they're doing is they're weighing the cost of, yes, there's going to be a media firestorm for 2 weeks. Yes, people are going to be talking about this for a long time. But I think what they are banking on is that the cost of that sort of bad press that the church is going to get isn't going to be as high as what they see as the cost of these people continuing to have influence as church members. And so for them, it's better to take the smaller hit of bad media than to allow these people to continue to present themselves as members and say the things that they're saying.
Do you really think, though, that they've really thought this out? I mean, think of the ordained women response that these women got. They had weeks to prepare. They knew they were going to come, and so they were met at the temple grounds, and they said, "Oh, you can't come on." They said, "Oh, we're going to go ask for tickets personally at the tabernacle." They go, and what did they do? They put a dump truck in front.
Yeah,
I mean,
the first time.
yeah, the first time, and it's just I just don't know if these people really understand the implications. of what they're doing.
Also, Andrew and I went this last time. And it was
Right.
so funny because they were telling all of the women, and we heard them say this, that the building is full. And then when I was standing in line to go up with some sisters and say my piece to whatever her name was,
She was a nice woman.
she was a nice woman who was being deeply manipulative, and it made me angry.
She was,
But
she
wait,
was a
wait.
squealer.
Yeah.
Animal Farm.
But we looked up in the window and it was like virtually empty. And they were telling everyone, "Oh, it's full. That's why we can't let you in." Like,
Right.
this is a blatant lie. But I want to go back to what Grant was saying because I definitely have something to say about that.
Well,
And that is that yes, we can assume that the church leaders are rational actors, but we have to ask the question of how was their decision-making mechanism framed? And I argue that it was framed in a historical context. And because our decision-making mechanism is framed in a different historical context, while they may be acting rationally, they are doing so by far different criteria that are not necessarily based on a descriptive understanding of society as it is right now.
So
And therefore, we can still call them naive.
okay, but what sort of calculation do you think they're making?
I think that they're doing precisely what you think they're doing. I just think they're underestimating the power of the internet
Right.
and connectivity.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. I
And
mean,
memes. My God.
Memes! My goodness, do they know the memes that have come out of this?
rationality doesn't mean that you're always making the correct calculation.
Which is why I'm not calling them irrational.
Right.
I'm saying they are boundedly rational.
Right. This is a debate among economists that doesn't matter.
This is one of the things that I think about when viewing this is, to me, it doesn't seem like a large group from the top of the church saying this is what needs to happen. It much more seems to me like maybe an area authority or a general authority in the 70 who wrote a letter or an email saying this is an action that I would suggest to you. Or
Don't you think?
this or that.
Well, and this is
Whether you call that rogue or not, I don't know. But
this is yet to be seen. But if that is the case, I would predict then that this would be stopped immediately because the fallout from this, I think it's going to be bigger than you think it is. Honestly,
Yeah.
I think judging from what I've seen on the internet and the groups that I'm a part of, I see a great deal of fear and a great deal of anger over this issue.
Well, but the top level of the church, and the church as an entity, has said that this is from the local level. Like they initially.
They have lied for the Lord.
I'm not saying whether that's true or not. I'm saying
we don't know.
from the PR standpoint, they do distance themselves from the decision making. So that way, if something does happen, they can say, "Well, it wasn't us," and then they don't have to initially say it now. They can let it take its process. It can be appealed to the first presidency, and then the decision can be reversed within church structure, so that they can say faith.
Wait,
It's built that way.
Does
to do
that
it.
happen in excommunication? Can you
That's what I've read online. I looked it up a little bit today.
You can appeal them.
Appeal them and it goes to the first presidency.
I think that technically what they're saying is correct. It is a local level thing, but I mean, again, like Grant said, if you get handed a packet of stuff from the first presidency,
Certainly.
you know what they
Well,
want.
if you get it from the committee and it comes on official church letterhead,
Yeah.
official envelope,
Right.
you're not going to not take
Well, and
that.
this is really interesting because, as far as I understand, John Dehlin has just got a new stake president who.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing too.
Because he said just today on the Trib Talk interview that he did that he was perfectly fine with this other stake president. The stake president knew where he was. He says he hasn't changed any of his positions that he didn't tell that stake president, and so this.
It's interesting what he said, that a year ago they said he was worthy to baptize his son, and nothing has changed in his viewpoints or what he's been doing or anything. Zero changes in his approach to the church, and now suddenly he's excommunicable.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's, what do they call it, leader roulette? Like, it just depends on who you're going to get.
It's so fascinating, yeah. And also, I think that one thing we need to be careful of is not talking about this as if it's a decision from the quote unquote church. Because even though I argue with you over rationality and public choice because it's fun, I agree fundamentally that the church is a conglomeration of individuals facing different incentives.
Yeah.
And so we have no idea which individuals made this, and it's really not indicative of any united front by the church, I don't think, or any like deep, dark, secret, hidden agenda.
Right.
It's much more likely to be the product of conjuncture, context, contingency, and accident.
This is Mormon People magazine. This is Mormon Entertainment Tonight.
No, but I mean, this is a serious thing. Like, I mean,
of course, I don't mean to diminish. I'm just meaning we're talking about basically gossip or hearsay.
Okay, yeah,
that's what I meant. That's what I meant.
That's true. But then the question that we need to distill from this is what useful things can we take away from this gossip and hearsay?
Well,
in the way that we approach Mormonism,
well,
the way that other people should approach Mormonism.
What I think is interesting is like, what effect is this going to have?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, what effect has it had on us? Let's start there.
Well, I was really surprised that they went after John Dehlin.
Yeah.
I felt, and I remember a few years ago, maybe it was last year, he requested people send in like notes or letters detailing how what he had done had helped him stay in the church because he was going to use it as evidence with the stake president, apparently with whom he was speaking, to like bolster his claim that he wasn't trying to lead people away, that he'd actually help people. And that, he had a meeting with the stake president, and it seemed like that went okay. And so I thought that was over. Like they realized, hey, this guy has a lot of influence. He's got a lot of followers. If he goes, I think a lot of people are going to go. Kate Kelly, I think it was really quick, considering how.
Compared to John Dehlin, which was 10 years he's been doing.
Yeah,
this.
Exactly. I think.
Yeah.
Well, women's issues are a little bit touchier, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I honestly was surprised. I didn't think that it would happen, and I'm just really surprised that they're going through with it.
For me, honestly, it has very little effect on the way I view Mormonism or my approach to Mormonism. I mean, it was not a surprise. It hasn't really impacted me emotionally. It's mostly just interesting, and I think overall it's a really stupid move because it just shows people who are in the margins that they don't belong in the church. And I think it increases the toll of human suffering on aggregate instead of decreasing it. And so I think it's a dumb move that I definitely don't support. But since when has my support ever mattered?
Well, in terms of its impact on me, in terms of its impact on me, I don't think it's not really affecting me.
Yeah.
I feel somewhat vindicated, though. I feel like the church, the message that I'm getting from this is they either want you to shut up or get out.
Mm-hmm.
Don't talk about your concerns with people. Talk about it with your bishop, which that's not healthy. John Dehlin made that point, I think, really, really well in his interview with the Salt Lake Tribune, that causes a great deal of, it causes depression, it causes suicide when people have to suffer in silence. And I know myself that John Dehlin really helped me when I was first going through my faith crisis by realizing, hey, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that's heard of these things. He introduced me to a wider world, a wider community. And so to just maintain that people ought to just keep quiet, I think it's abusive.
For me, it was actually Rock Waterman. He was my first introduction to, I guess, different types of thoughts within Mormonism, and also looking at, I guess, some of the deeper, more controversial history in Mormonism. I was at the time really in the depths of struggling with my sexual orientation, and I came across an article he had written on the Word of Wisdom, I think, and then I just devoured his entire blog, and it brought me so much emotional relief. And then after that, I found Mormon stories. But speaking of talking to your bishops, I posted an article or two about this stuff. And some people commented on it, saying that if people have issues with the church, they should take them to speak about them privately to their bishops and stake presidents to get them resolved. And I've had experience with that because I think that was actually the first avenue I went on, really, when I first started learning all this information. I first talked to my bishop and told him these are the things I'm doubting about, and he was really curious. And he's like, well, let's talk about it. What's everything that you're having doubts with? And so I went through basically everything with him. And at the end of it, he was just like, Josh, you told me things that I've never heard before, and honestly, they're kind of difficult for me to deal with, and I have no idea what to say to you, so I'm going to have you talk with the stake president. And so I set up a time to meet with the stake president, told him the exact same things, and he said the exact same thing to me, and it was like, I have no idea, I've never heard this stuff before, I really can't help you, I'll talk to the area authority and see if he can meet with you. And so he tried to like talk to the area authority to like have him meet with me, but then just never happened. It fell through. And by that point, I just wasn't interested anymore because I realized that my local leaders don't have the answers because there aren't answers to be had on these questions.
Well, see, the thing is, I don't think that part is necessarily true. I mean, I think the idea or ideas are made to be shared. You cannot. I mean, one thing that they told in these letters was, well, we don't want to change your thoughts, but you just can't say them anymore. Well, if you can't speak what you think, then you can't analyze your idea. That's how ideas are made and they're shaped. If you want a resolution to some of these questions, you have to engage in a dialogue with the community. That's one of Mormonism's greatest strengths, is its community. And by saying, we will excommunicate you if you try and bring these issues up within the community as opposed to just the leaders who, don't know everything, but the aggregate knowledge of all of the members is a lot better than just the leaders.
Well, imagine if you heard that.
Right? I mean, you think you can, this kind of dialogue. So, like, for me personally, John Dehlin has helped me a lot throughout my faith crisis. I mean, I've only met him a few times, but I've listened to most of his podcasts. And for me, I was able to realize through his podcast and through the people he's bringing on that you can be a Mormon and you can have questions, and that's okay. That you don't have to, when these issues start to come up, you don't have to do what a lot of people do. And I'm not saying that, it's necessarily wrong that they do it, but you don't have to do what a lot of people do and just immediately, leave quickly. But instead, you can stay, you can think about it, and you can take kind of a long-term view of these issues. I mean, I'm very grateful for what John Dehlin has done, for what he's put together, and honestly, like, these things mostly just make me sad. Like, I think that this will have a chilling effect on liberal discourse in the church. I think that you're going to end up with...
I don't even think liberal, even just thoughtful. Thoughtful discourse.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate because, there are so many great people that have ideas that are, they're not quite exactly in line with, what you read in the Sunday school manual, but they're helpful and they're useful. I think of people like, for instance, Dan Witherspoon with his Mormon Matters podcast, which is a very faith-promoting, but yet unorthodox place for dialogue that, I wouldn't want to see, something like this happen to him either. But I think that, and I've listened to some of the things he's put out just recently, and he said that, this isn't going to get him to stop doing what he's doing, and I commend him for that. But I think that there definitely will be a lot of people that will think twice before they post that Facebook article. They're going to...
Or start their own podcast.
Yeah, or start their own podcast.
If John Dehlin gets excommunicated, who will take his place?
Well, he's still going to keep going.
Well, right, but I mean in terms of like
someone who's in the church.
From the church, yeah. I mean, I think it's just going to push the discourse, push the conversation. And there we go.
Well, this harkens back to the September 6th when, and then just a few years earlier when Elder Oaks gave his talk on alternate voices on how you should avoid, Sunstone and dialogue and these kind of alternate outlets for thought. Well, what that did was it pushed all of the faithful members out of that, and it left only the ex-Mormons who had nothing to lose anymore. And
not only, but largely.
Largely. Right, there were a few.
Yeah.
There were a few still there, but I think an effect that this can have is by pushing, it can push faithful members out of the bloggernacle, it can push faithful members out of podcasts and from trying to explore these thoughts with each other. And eventually what it does is it means that when a member has questions and they go to look for resources, what they'll find are things from people who have left the church, people who are more on the anti-side or the ex-Mormon side, and they will have fewer resources available that are trying to keep them in the church. So, I mean, I do think this is ultimately harmful for the church members.
But I think that, and this is why it's so hard to predict the outcome, because it could have the very opposite impact. I mean, a lot of people could feel inspired by it to try to create more space for people like John Dehlin and Kate Kelly, who have been, but like their excommunication can inspire people to create the space for people like that and to speak up. And as more and more people speak up, then the church leaders might realize like, oh, we really do need to make a space for these people. So I think that.
But from the leader's perspective, it would be a harm, like in terms of the scenario that Grant painted.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, like, we really just can't predict.
harm.
It'll be interesting to see what
Take for instance, John Dehlin. I mean, he has had faithful Mormons on his podcast. He's had guys like, Philip Barlow,
Richard Bushman,
Terrell Givens, guys like that.
Even Dan Peterson.
Yeah, even Dan Peterson. They're not going to go on a podcast run, by like John Larson or something. They might. But
John's a good. I like John's podcast. I've never met him, but I like his style.
But he's speaking to a different audience, and he has a little bit of a different tone. If you want to get that sort of faithful but thoughtful dialogue, and you leave people with nowhere to hear it, I mean, you're going to have that problem.
Yeah.
Well, and going back to this idea of, just take your concerns to your bishop. Don't talk about them. You can think what you want, just don't say it. Imagine if that were made in any other context, a political context. You can think what you want, you can believe what you want, just don't tell anyone.
Take your concerns to the mayor.
Right.
Don't tell anyone.
Just go to the mayor, the governor, maybe your senator. And if you have any problems there, we'll contact people.
Right. You can say what you want, just don't write them down. Or
You know what? That is starting to sound eerily similar to other places that
well, and
gone awry.
my experience when I first encountered things, for example, my first foray into Mormon doctrinal historical issues was the Adam God theory, and my parents had never heard of this. I tried talking to them about it. It didn't really, they couldn't help me with my questions, and so I did go to my bishop, and luckily, talking of Leader Roulette, he was a very nice, thoughtful man who listened empathetically. He knew about the Adam God doctrine. He knew about the difficult historical issues. And so for me, he was a good model of faith and thoughtfulness. But I know that is a rare occurrence. I know that not everyone gets that sort of a bishop. In fact, in college, I've gone to my bishops and told them about my situation, my beliefs, my standing, and the last bishop I went and talked to, he had no idea what I was talking about. He never heard of the issues that I raised in terms of concerns. So I know that my initial experience before my mission wasn't representative of the general situation of going and talking to your bishop and being heard and being and even getting any answers provided. I mean, the most they can do is just give an empathetic ear. But like Grant said, if people are more thoughtful, faithful people are scared of posting things because they might be perceived as unorthodox or this or that, you'll just get a skewed perspective online.
I think that if there's anything I learned from John Dehlin, it's that you don't need answers to still be a Mormon. That sometimes these questions don't have answers, and that's okay. That a lack of answers, I mean, it's kind of the nature of life. I mean, you just don't know things, and so it makes me sad to think that that someone who doesn't claim to have the answers to these problems, that someone who's, as John Dehlin says, he doesn't believe in many of the church's claims. What those are specifically, I don't know. But it makes me sad to see this sort of a response.
What I liked, Ian posted something on Facebook today about the rise of modern Mormonism and David O. McKay's experience with Sterling McMurrin, who was very, he was a philosophy professor at the University of Utah in the 50s and 60s, and he outright said, I don't believe in the church's truth claims, and so he was getting a church court convened against him, but David O. McKay was a very dear friend of his and assured him and made sure that he didn't get excommunicated. Because,
So there's a couple of things he said that I really like about
why
it.
don't you quote what he said?
So this is from McMurrin's own account, and
It's from Greg Prince's book, David Almost Gave the Rise of Modern Mormonism.
Yeah, and what he says in it is he met with President McKay, and he was very affectionate the whole time, really nice. And then he said to him while taking hold of his knee, "They can't do this to you. They can't do this to you. They can't put you on trial." And his response to President McKay was, "Well, President McKay, you know better than I what they can do, but it appears to me that they are going to put me on trial." And he said, it's a great line, he says, "Well, all I can say is that if they put you on trial for excommunication, I'll be there as the first witness in your behalf."
And I think that in President Uchtdorf's talk, Come Join With Us, or whatever that's called, he makes this point, whatever the strength of your testimony, there's room for you in this church. Which, John Dehlin, to the extent that he's been vocal about him not having belief in certain tenets of the church, that seems to contradict Elder Uchtdorf's the general idea of what he was trying to do. That there's room for you, come and serve. We want you here regardless of what you may think or don't think. And I just think that this totally spoils that.
Actually, something that was really touching to me, that was a really great experience, was the first time I went and talked to my bishop about this stuff. And I had talked to previous priesthood leaders about, like same-sex attraction, quote unquote. So-called same. I had talked to them about so-called same-sex attraction and other like doubts and stuff. And I'd always received it was always more of a sweep it under the rug approach. But my last bishop, even though he didn't have the answers I was looking for, he said that he just looked at me and he was like, "Josh, no matter what happens, I will always be your advocate." And that really hit me at that time, because I had been pondering about how Christ is our advocate. And I don't know, that was really profound to me. And to me, I don't necessarily believe that Jesus of Nazareth was God or the Son of God or anything, or the scriptures, or that the scriptures are divine. But to me, there's something so beautiful in playing the role of an advocate for people, always giving people the benefit of the doubt, always trying to advocate for them. And I think that's something so beautiful. It seems to me to be so Christ-like, that's missing, I think, from a lot of the way that the church is approaching these issues, or people within the church, rather, to mind my own critique.
Well, so one of the things that made me think of was a quote that's been posted to Facebook quite a bit from Joseph Smith.
And this is John Dehlin posted this on his status.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's from the history of the church, and to quote Joseph Smith, he says, I did not like the old man being called up for erring in doctrine. It looks too much like the Methodists and not like the Latter-day Saints. Methodists have creeds which a man must believe or be asked out of their church. I want the liberty of thinking and believing as I please. It feels so good not to be trampled. It does not prove that a man is not good because he errs in doctrine. And this gets to one of the things that really perturbs me about this, is that we put up these standards of belief, right? And I'm not saying standards as in church standards,
right,
but these are the narratives and stories that we will tell and that you believe, or you don't get to be part of our organization. And I think any organization that does that on a large scale invites some level of corruption. And I'm not saying that's how the church is, or that it's corrupt or anything like that, but it invites the possibility for it. If you can direct those to your own means, then there's something that's wrong. And when you have large groups of people discussing and talking about ideas and being open about their beliefs and disbeliefs, it checks any misuse of power, right? I'll say that about any large organization. The church is not excluded from that. We have a large bureaucratic organization that takes actions to protect the organization itself. All bureaucracies do that. And I don't think the church is separate from that idea or from that process. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if we look at it from a gospel standpoint, from what are the teachings of Christ and of Joseph Smith, does this show Christ-like action? And I don't think it does. Because for me, Christ gave hope to people. He mourned with those who mourn, and he commanded us to do it. And John Dehlin, in my experience and through his podcast, he's helped me through serious times of doubt and struggle, and and honestly, there's a part of me that thinks that I wouldn't be as strong in my belief or as happy as I am now had his podcast not been there for me to listen to when I needed it. And I hate to see something that beautiful that helps people as much as it do be.
I read this horrible quote by Dan Peterson on he just did a blog about this situation. He said that John Dehlin has really harmed people's testimonies, and I can give you evidence of it, but the problem is that isn't that John Dehlin is hurting people's testimony. It's probably that they heard something that they've never heard before on John Dehlin's podcast, and so are shooting the messenger instead of thinking, why didn't I hear this in Sunday school?
Yeah,
right?
well, it's like I once was talking with one of my friends about church history, and somehow I ended up bringing up polygamy. Joseph Smith had multiple wives, and my friend was shocked. He'd never heard of this. He'd never heard of polyandry. He had no idea that Joseph Smith had multiple wives. And afterwards, I felt kind of bad. I was like, well, should I have told him this? And then at the same time, it's like, why should I feel bad? I'm not the guy who married multiple women. It was Joseph Smith, right? And that is a historical fact. That is a thing that happened. And because my friend didn't take it very well, isn't my fault.
You're harming people's testimonies, Grant.
I mean, it's just history. These are things that happen, and you can't. Now, what you do with that, telling someone, oh, well, therefore you should or you shouldn't be Mormon because of these different historical things, I think is a little bit of a different story. But just laying the information out there and letting people have a voice, like John Dehlin does. He doesn't. That's his whole thing. Is he doesn't advocate for people to. He doesn't say you should stay or you shouldn't stay. He says that you should do what you feel directed to do by God or by yourself or whatever is best for you.
And what I've just always appreciated about him in his interviewing style and everything, he just lets people tell their stories, and and present information. And he has a website called Stay LDS, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
So last podcast I talked about my experience when I was in China the first time, talking to this girl that I met who actually wondered about my experience and just wanted to know how relieving that was for me. I think the second person I met, whoever did that, was John Dehlin. Because a few weeks after getting back from China, I met with John Dehlin for the first time. We had lunch, and he really just asked me about my story, asked me about my experience, just really was curious about my experience, and that was just so meaningful to me. And especially after I got, because at that point I didn't know a ton about him, I didn't know him really well, but after meeting him, I listened to a lot more of his the podcast he did, and I realized he has heard my story a million times, and yet he was still interested in my story. Mm-hmm. And since then, in my interactions with him and watching how he, I guess, acts in public and everything, I just so admire his authenticity, his honesty, and how much he cares about everyone's experience, whether or not they're in line with his. And that's the same with Kate Kelly. I mean, I'm not as familiar with her as I am with John Dehlin, but watching her interview today with the Salt Lake Tribune, she also just seems to be so honest, so authentic. And
that's what she said in one of her blog posts.
Is apostasy being honest? Is that what it means now? Mm-hmm. That when you're honest with yourselves and others who've committed apostasy and you need to be excommunicated, then excommunicate me, because I'm going to be honest.
But no, that's one of the things Kate Kelly said in her blog post about it, was that the church basically, her local leaders, is a better way to put it, is asking her to live in an authentic life. And that just can't be right. No.
Because we've got to live according to the dictates of our own consciences.
Yeah. One of the things you had brought up earlier that made me think was the quote from J. Reuben Clark is it's quoted at the front of the letter to the CS director.
Oh, if we have the truth, then it cannot be harmed.
Yeah, if we have the truth, it can't be harmed by investigation. If we have not the truth, it should be harmed.
Ought to be harmed.
It ought to be harmed. And so why
punish those who are doing the investigating?
Yeah, right. So if sunlight is the best disinfectant, then why only ask bishops and stake precedents? Why only bring these ideas to behind closed doors? Should we not be open if it is true?
Well,
and
I believe that it is true, and we should be open.
Someone today who I don't think is extremely familiar with me now, just knew me in the past, posted and told me that I have to be careful what I say because not everyone has as strong a faith as me. And so they can't deal with these issues. And I was just like, well, I don't believe the church is true, so you can't really tell me someone with strong faith. And B, like how judgmental to be able to not trust that people have the capability to figure these things out on their own. Like, no, we need to protect people.
I'm sorry, you
This
don't
is the
have a
Boyd-
strong enough spirit to understand.
Exactly. This is the Boyd K. Packer mentality of like, oh, not all truth is helpful. Because I think like fundamentally we need to respect everyone's ability to use their own minds and their own hearts to digest new information and determine what to do with it.
Right.
with their
Well,
own
very
lives.
patronalistic. It's very
So
patronizing.
paternalistic.
But here's
So
the-
patronizing.
here's
So
the-
belittling.
Here's the thing too. It's like newsflash. There's the internet. Like everyone is going to be exposed to these issues. Everyone will be.
Everyone has the Journal of Discourses right now in their pocket, and they
Yeah.
can go to any page in 10 seconds.
But they don't. They look at pictures of cats.
Okay, but I'm theoretically, that's what I'm
Right, and so
We should just
Yeah.
take the Journal of Discourses and put them on memes, so that everybody can see them.
On cat memes.
No,
Angry cat pictures.
no, I mean
Negro.
I have seen people put quotes on memes from the Journal of Discourses, those kind of things. But like the point is that you cannot isolate yourself anymore. The church
Mhm.
leadership can no longer keep this information from the members. They're getting it now, and as you know, Marlon Jensen famously said, you know, this is a time when a lot of people are leaving the church over this.
It's the last days. Even the elect are falling.
We shall be separated from the tares. No, I'm going to play the devil's advocate and be the church's. I'm going to be the church's position and say,
The devil's advocate with the church.
right. Sorry, my mistake.
I'm going to
I'm
be
gonna
the
be
angel's
Eagle's
advocate here.
And I'm going to say, well, we don't. It's not questioning. It's not. It's not asking difficult questions. It's what perspective are you coming from? Are you doing it to take down the church, or are you doing that find actual understanding? And look at people like Richard Bushman, look at people like Marlon Jensen or Richard Turley. The church has a lot of historians that know these issues and are asking these difficult questions. And so it's not.
But that's a dishonest approach because it assumes that the answer is already known.
Exactly. That's the point I was going to make. Is because inherent in that question, if it were viewed as the question is stated that you just did, I would agree with you. But too often do we say those words, but we mean if you're going to find the same answer that I already have in my mind,
And it
then
comes
you're perfectly.
It comes exactly how you said it, with the modifier actual. If we're going to look for the actual truth, you know, as if okay, so if we're actually looking for understanding, then we'll agree with the church in the end, you know.
Well, it's our
that
first
modifier is
podcast
dangerous.
of asking questions versus questioning.
Which you can
Yeah.
listen to. I mean, we don't need to rehash that.
No, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
Let's do it here and now.
No, but I mean, so people are going to say, no, we have Richard Bushman, no, we have Terrell Givens, no, we have all these other people that are, you know, good historians, professional historians, and scholars and intellectuals who are looking at these things. But John Dehlin is doing it in a way that harms faith, and so therefore we have the duty as people who don't want people to go to hell or to have their testimonies harmed. We need to not let him have the sanction of the church or the unofficial cover of I'm a Mormon. He's being a wolf in sheep's clothing. Not that I believe that, but I'm just making that argument. Why my argument against that would say John Dehlin isn't a wolf in sheep's clothing because he's been very open and honest about his position and his thoughts. And he's been probably more open than almost anyone.
Right, and what I would say is primarily what he's doing
He's
isn't.
a wolf in wolf's clothing.
No, but what he's doing, he's not telling people, oh, you should leave the church, you should join the church. What he's saying, or stay in the church, what he's saying, or what he's doing is giving people an open forum. So,
right,
because he wants people to make informed decisions rather than saying, okay, here are some approved scholars like Terrell Givens, like Richard Bushman. You can listen to these people. Don't worry about anything else. Instead, what he's saying is, no, we're going to bring these people on. They're going to have their say. We're going to bring people from the other side, like Simon Southerton, Grant Palmer, those people.
Sandra Tanner.
We're going to bring people from the other side and let them have your say. You know, it's kind of the whole we report, you decide.
Well, and I think that Kate Kelly made this point very good.
Thankfully.
Kate Kelly made this point very clear in her interview today with the Sled Tribune. Again, we keep going back to it. You guys should listen to it. But she says something like, I think it was Kate Kelly, but you can listen to the experience of people now. You don't have to get it filtered through the church. You don't have to get it filtered through Deseret News. Go talk to these people firsthand, and you can hear their story. And I think in that way, we create empathy. And I think that is what the church fears, is that people empathize with their position. And so that's why they want to silence them.
The church fears empathy. Wow.
I think that they don't want, they're trying to delegitimize them. They're trying to paint them as enemies of the church, as dissidents, as apostates. and as a result, curb the massive defections that we're seeing by young people and other people who've discovered difficult historical.
And the thing is, like, I would like to curb the mass defections. I just don't think that this is the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best way, just be honest, be open.
Yeah.
Let people make their own decisions. They're not
Like
treat
millennials like adults. Guys.
treat adults like adults.
Treat
I mean,
adults like adults.
I know
Yeah.
people in their mid-50s that don't know
Yeah.
about the church history. They've been members their entire lives, tithing, paying, church going, and treat adults like adults.
Yeah.
And when I was a child, I thought I was a child. And I'm not a child. I put away childish things.
I think that like ultimately my takeaway from all this, for myself, and I would advocate for everyone else, is just to continue being fearless, continue being open and authentic, and continue approaching the difficult questions. Because the fact that like they're excommunicating them, I think means that they're the ones asking the important question. Like they're betraying the people who have important things to say.
Like the fact that they're being excommunicated means they're relevant.
Exactly.
That meme you saw on Facebook.
But there's that Game of Thrones.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
It's about like if you pull out their tongue, it means you fear what they have to say.
Yeah.
If you pull out their tongue, it's not that they have nothing to say. It's that you fear that they have something to say.
I just think that like one of my favorite quotes that's really kind of changed my paradigm is from Khalil Gibran, and he says, "The teacher who is truly wise does not lead you into the house of his own wisdom, but to the threshold of your own mind." I really love that because I think that's ultimately like for me the spiritual path, the path for all learning is turning inside of yourself and finding what's in there, learning the way you think, learning the way you interact with information, learning how you relate to deity, the divine, the sacred, whatever that is. So I think that like I really hope that all of this just causes people to reflect more deeply and turn inward.
Good. No one can. That's a good point.
And Andrew looked upon them and said,
I mean, I don't know what else I have to say, except for what I've already said, other than that this just makes me sad. I think it's unfortunate. I'm very grateful for what John Dehlin and Kate Kelly and Rock Waterman have been doing. I don't have as much of a connection with Kate Kelly as I do with John Dehlin. I've met John Dehlin a few times. I'm at Utah State. He's at Utah State. I've listened to much of what he has to say, and I'm grateful for what he's done for the Mormon community. And I think it's sad to see people pushed out like this and people trammeled, as Joseph Smith was sad to see.
Yeah. My takeaway is I don't think this is some top-down thing. I don't think this is orchestrated from the very top of the church. I do believe that there's some level of general authority participation.
Isn't that top down though?
Not the top. I'd say middle management here.
I have to say, I'd say at least
road
quorum of the 12.
decisions.
At least quorum of the 12.
I think we just don't know. I mean, at least the Strengthening Church Members Committee,
Yes.
which is pretty tough.
I think that there are apostles on that though.
I have no idea. I don't know anything about that.
I think you can probably look this up, but I'm pretty sure that Delaney Chokes was once the head of that. Anyways.
But for me, all said and done, I want to be part of communities and part of organizations that embrace diversity in opinion, that embrace differences among the way we think, because I think that protects us. I think that allows us to grow in ways that we don't see when we're all of a single viewpoint. I don't believe in the scriptures when it says of one mind and one heart. It means that we all think the same. I think it means we all think we're allowed to think differently. And it's sort of a meta one mind.
Good.
And I encourage people to do that. So at the same time, I think that we should be allowed to say these things and that people should be encouraged and invited and rejoiced when they do. The other side, do the same. And if you don't like it, say that you don't like it. And I'll tell you that I don't agree with you and that you make me angry. But
in love.
But you make me angry in love.
But you engage them with long suffering.
But I really want to see people talk about ideas because that's how I found growth in my own life, and I think we see growth in people in general. And that's what I want to see.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you. Just gonna say. Well, thank you all for joining us today for this episode, and a special thank you to Kate Kelly and John Dehlin and Rock Waterman for the impact you've had on our lives and the impact you continue to have for people. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Stand
Thanks.
strong.
This has been Mormon Millennials Podcast. The music is by Kevin MacLeod, used under a Creative Commons license. Thank you for listening.